Am I on here? Get that light. Okay, let me do a little update on. It's a little wet out, so I might have to walk back in, but my light is not good on this. Let's see. A couple of news stories. And just a quick update. I got up at 4. I had to get some work done, and I usually do about a 3-hour. It usually takes about 3 hours to do the praying, but I didn't feel well, and it's important though that I quoted all the verses, did my normal Saturday routine, but last night I started getting the San Antonio paper instead of the Corpus Christi paper. And I wonder, let me see if I can adjust this light. But I read the story of the guy that was put to death here in Texas, Battaglia maybe. I was going to write notes and I didn't have a chance. There's a few things I want to hit on. But he was put to death because he murdered his 2 young daughters, Faith and Liberty. I don't know how I can remember that. But the man was like estranged, his wife was estranged, and he had parental rights. And one day he had his children, and his wife had reported him to the police for harassment, but yet he still had parental rights. And then he took the 2 kids, and the San Antonio paper, printed the words of the 2 young children, like 6 and 8 or something like that. And then he called his ex-wife, and she called back, and then he put it on speakerphone, and the 2 young children said, "Daddy, please don't shoot us." And then he killed them, and he shot them on speakerphone. Of course, they printed it and all, and just those, I think they should be more careful, simply because just the effect of reading that. "Daddy, please don't kill us." Just those words, they have an effect to read that. It's because of the tragedy, and you say, but we shine light on things by I don't think they should have put those words of those kids. And so somehow that played some effect on me throughout the night, besides other things people go through. So, and then I was thinking, but I went through my prayer time, but I was thinking, thoughts that I had was, and what is the whole, that man was born, and then throughout his life, the sin, the mystery of iniquity, wickedness within humanity, and then it brought him to a place where these 2 young children, who were innocent, got caught up in his vengeance towards his ex, and then he shot them on speakerphone, and the words of those beautiful children, Faith and Liberty, "Daddy, please don't kill us." And so now, of course, rightfully he was executed here in Texas. I think the 3rd one since of the year. They're all in Texas. 3 executions. He deserved it, obviously. And so now he's dead, rightfully. But the 2 children are dead. I guess the ex is still alive. So the tragedy and devastation, and in my mind and so he was supposed to obviously resist the temptation to go out and murder and kill his children, but he failed. He didn't do well, and say, well, you didn't do right. I mean, that's how it's think. And all of this that we see in humanity, so a lot of questions, but I still continued to do my normal thing. I wanted to mention the whole Memo. I want to mention the CCPD released the video of the shooting of Bboy Lister. I have his picture up there. I'm not sure why they released the video now. It was, the officer has it. It seems as if he followed protocol. I felt in the beginning of the Bboy Lister shooting, he's a black man who was shot and killed here in Corpus Christi, was pulled over. I commented on the case. And as I look, and I always felt like the video probably showed, according to standard protocol in our country, it probably showed, if you will, a justified shooting. I felt that was the case because of just reading some of the things. And of course, the release of the video, it seems like Officer Hassett did everything according to the way he was supposed to function. And I felt when the district attorney, Mark Gonzalez, presented it to a grand jury, and I think that as you looked at the entire thing, this tragic killing kind of went along. It wasn't the ones that are really bad that we have seen in the last many years. And I just think that the question in our society is not so much how justified are these killings that take place, but the question is, should policing be more of a de-escalation, meaning some departments practice de-escalation, that the last resort is to pull the service revolver and shoot a man. And in the pursuit of a person, just in the general context, that there are some countries that the very last resort on their policing is to pull and shoot. So I think the question is more of how are we doing it in the United States. In many cases, victims or people that officers are stopping, of course, if they have a gun, they say, and if you're an officer and you're going to shoot, they're taught you don't shoot to wound. If it rises to the level where you use your service weapon, you shoot to kill. So the Hassett video, Officer Hassett and the tragic killing of Bboy Lister, the video seems to show that Hassett followed protocol. And I felt that all along it was going to show that. But they just released it yesterday, and I'm not sure why. And Chief Markle asked, he said, let's pray for everybody involved, including the families. And now, on the memo, those who follow the politics, the big memo thing had to do with the investigation of Mr. Trump. I walked past Trump Tower when all of this was going on last year, and when it all began, and then the news broke. Trump tweeted, they tapped my phones, Obama tapped my phones. Now the media mocked Trump. Mr. Clapper, James Clapper, the former NSA man, he was interviewed on TV and said they made Trump, they sort of said Trump is such an idiot that who would ever think that Obama would, quote, wiretap or obtain warrants on him or his people. So, in order to show that Trump was an idiot, they had James Clapper on national TV. And they asked him, has Obama or is the government doing any wiretapping, listening to any phone calls or anything of that nature on Trump or on his people? And Mr. Clapper emphatically said no. Like, Trump is a nut to think that there might be a warrant on him or on his people during the campaign investigating him or his people. That's what Trump had accused. And James Clapper emphatically said, if there was any warrants, FISA warrants, tapping, or any of that nature, I would know about it because Mr. Clapper was head of the NSA. So then the media, all of that was false. Actually, they were wiretapping Carter Page, one of Trump's men. And then we've learned, the memo basically showed that in order for the FBI, the Justice Department, Obama's Justice Department, in order for them to have obtained FISA warrants. FISA it was implemented after 9/11, after the tragedy, and it basically said this is like how we can obtain warrants on U.S. citizens secretly for the whole purpose of terrorism. It's like back in the old days, in the mob days, mafia days, you had what was called the RICO statute law. And so you can go after like gang and mob, but then over time, RICO law was used in other ways. So what you really had in this whole thing was Trump correct, or did the Obama administration, people in the Justice Department at high levels, people in the FBI at high levels, did they have the goal to actually obtain search warrants on American citizens? And did they use opposition research by one candidate in order to obtain those warrants? That was really the big question. That's exactly what happened, okay? So you had the Hillary Clinton people in her campaign. They hired a firm called Fusion GPS, and they paid a lot of money to that firm. And that firm got opposition research. And there was a man by the name of Steele, a former British spy, and he was getting, quote, opposition research. Now, it was unverified, and the stories, when they broke, came out in the media. And some of them were real salacious, and the media went with that. But the Justice Department, FBI, they used that. They used opposition research from a candidate to indeed, quote, tap the phones. That was wrong. Now, when I watched the media report on that, I saw Chuck Todd, top news, when you click on the NBC News, top, and he's interviewing somebody about investigations like this. And look at the manipulation. He was asking one of the intelligence people that reports on it, court expert. He said, is it wrong for the Justice Department or the FBI to ever use information obtained outside of their own investigations to investigate other people? And the man on NBC said, oh no, whenever the Justice Department or the FBI do investigations, they always use information obtained from other sources. Well, of course. And that's not the question. The question is, how often has our Justice Department or the FBI launched an investigation or obtained FISA warrants from opposition research from another political candidate during a campaign? The answer to that would be never. You would never use opposition research that was unverifiable from one campaign accusing another campaign, trying to get dirt on them, and then you actually used that political information, called the Trump dossier, Russian dossier, to obtain warrants on American citizens, Carter Page and the Trump people. So the true answer is that has never been done in the history of this country. And Mr. Comey and others misrepresented. The release of the memo showed when they obtained this warrant, they misrepresented the information they had. That's what that showed. Because they did not tell that FISA judge that this was opposition research, this, quote, Russian dossier by this British man, Steele. But the media is not really concerned. I also saw another thing on Judy Woodruff from PBS. PBS News began asking a little more questions, and they had Bernie Sanders on. And Judy Woodruff, I think these people are really misinformed, but somebody probably told her, well, you know, there's a question now whether or not the investigation of Mr. Trump, if they used the political motivation to maybe overstep lines. She asked Mr. Sanders that. Mr. Sanders basically was answering a political line, and he basically said, no, we shouldn't even question it because Trump this, Trump that. Bernie Sanders tried to get a movement behind him where a lot of people that were true, liberals, and he has blown that because one of the true liberal viewpoints is you always question the power of government and the power of people that are political parties using the offices of government, Justice Department, FBI, to go after political enemies. And that's something that all true liberals are concerned about. So in this case, yes. And what my mind also goes back to is you began investigating the whole thing. You used this opposition research paid for by the Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party, and you used it to launch a huge investigation and to spy on Americans. And there were crimes here. And Mr. Comey and Mr. Holder continued to tweet, and they continued to say things, but they overstepped their bounds in some of the things that they did. And then it led to one of Trump's people. They went back all the way and investigated. His name is Paul Manafort, who did indeed have some shaky dealings in his past. They went back and found things on Mr. Manafort. And then the FBI raided his home at 2 in the morning, guns a-blazing, went in and searched his wife in bed. Now that woman, married to Mr. Manafort throughout her life, probably never thought there would come a time where the FBI would raid their residence and search her in bed and scare and traumatize that woman. And then the media reported, well, that's how Mueller is. They did it to rough him up. You got questions in this country. I remember stories where, because I looked at a lot of these policing things and all, and I remember stories where FBI, SWAT teams, they showed up at a home of a man looking for a relative of that man or someone, not him. And the man opened the door and his wife and kids were home. He might have been in his 30s. And it was this same, quote, justice group. But what they did was knocked on the door. The man opened the door and said, what? Like a SWAT team there. They said, we want to know if so-and-so is here. Now, the person they were looking for was not there. But he slammed the door. Got them mad. They kicked the door in, pulled him out, and shot him in the back multiple times, murdered him in cold blood in front of his kids. So you always be careful in a society where you begin drumming up and saying, well, all of these things were justified. Whether it's where you pulled the Manafort woman out of the bed because Mr. Mueller, and then we look at this and then the media continues to say they play a political game. So you always watch out for that. And the killing of that man, because he slammed the door, was considered justified. Because we, the FBI or whoever it is, we're out to mete out justice. And that, in those cases, it's cold-blooded murder. In those cases, in front of that man's kids. Shot him multiple times in the back. What was the justification for that? They were pissed off because he slammed the door. So I look at all this and the Mueller thing, and I watch the news, and remember, the media have been reporting basically, and that one thing, it said, oh, the Justice Department and the FBI, how often do they use other information? Meaning in an investigation, well, always. But how often do they use political opposition research to lead to the point where you're dragging Manafort's wife out of bed because you're strong-arming her? Never. And we talk about Watergate. There's a different level. Watergate was the infamous, Nixon knew about a break-in at a hotel by the name of Watergate. He didn't, the president simply knew about it and covered it up. But imagine if you had a president that used his Justice Department to go after reporters to tap into Cheryl Atkinson. And then you had these people behind the scenes getting opposition research on one particular person. And then when that person, Mr. Trump, found out that they did do stuff like that, the famous quote, "They tapped my phones," even Mr. Clapper and others went on media outlets and they said, and they denied, they said there are no FISA warrants at all on Trump or on his people. This is leadership of intelligence agencies in this country going back this past year, openly saying there is no FISA warrant. There are no tapping of anybody's phones, and we are not investigating through FISA warrant Trump or his people. We emphatically deny it. That's what the government said. And then they were doing it. And you think there would be one Democrat that would say, wait a minute, we denied that we were investigating Trump and his people. We denied it. We said it wasn't happening. We mocked the man because he said it was happening. And now we find out not only was it happening, but it was happening because they used opposition research, which in the history of the country, you never investigated another political person, even after he became elected. So one of the marks against the Obama administration and the Hillary type people was they did indeed use the Justice Department in more ways than one, and the FBI to do illegal things. And it is illegal to not, they did not inform the FISA judge when they went to get these warrants. They did not let him know that the key piece of evidence they were using was opposition research, which was unverifiable. And that is injustice that they did that. It's injustice that you went into that Manafort's home and searched his wife in bed, guns ablazing. That's an injustice. That's no different than what you have done. And every one of the liberals and the news people and the Pelosi's, they asked Mr. Sanders about, they said, what about the deal that we could have with the kids? We might be able to give a citizenship to 1.8 million. And Sanders, all he said was, we have enough votes to extend DACA. Trump does not want to extend DACA. That man lies to you. Nobody wanted DACA because it's a coupon. It's fake. It's temporary. The Supreme Court's going to overturn it. Mr. Sanders is not concerned about the immigrants. He's one of them. When you go back to his past statements, he said things like, and these immigrants, those of you who think these immigrants are filling jobs for needed in the country, he's the one that says they're stealing our jobs. See, a lot of these, so Schumer and the Sanders guys, they said some of the most racist stuff against immigrants in the last 10 years, and then they totally changed. These people have no righteousness within them. Zero. And so we'll watch it. The true story about all of that, there's a couple of things I was going to mention, but the true story is they overstepped their bounds. And all of the Democrats that are in positions, what they did here is a lot worse than Watergate, which caused the resignation of President Nixon. It's worse because you used Justice Department, people with their own views. And never in the history of this country was opposition research, meaning if Mr. Trump and his people faked something on Hillary, they faked something on her, then they had it written up. And then that fake thing that Trump said about Hillary was then used to tap into and to basically investigate Hillary, her people, and then if she got elected president. But this thing that Trump paid for, meaning opposition research, continued to allow an investigation to go on even after she was elected. That's a debacle that they've done it. But the media, they're not concerned about it. Many on the left, it's their hatred that are going to prevent them to do deal for these DACA kids. It's their hatred. and they would claim to you that they're voices of righteousness, and they're not. They're not. And so what I'm looking at when I see it is whether it's the Muellers, the Rosensteins, and all these people, whether this process they used, particularly to go into that man's home and frisk her wife in bed at 2 in the morning, and she's changed. She's changed from that to wake up that morning at 2 a.m. and guns there. What are you doing in my house? Get on the floor, lady. When you cross lines like that, and you see all these hypocrites in the media talking about we're for justice, we're for rights, they are a huge sham. I bought the San Antonio paper because they have a lot more than the Corpus Caller. And the Corpus paper is the same exact thing. They couldn't care if their side broke every law in the book, if their side scuttled the whole immigration. They would do it just to have something they could use against Trump. They're not even concerned about the true immigrants. The ones are like Gutierrez, the ones that said, pay for the wall, we don't care, let's get. They're the ones that mean it. But you have all these local type of the same mindset. They don't care. And what's going to happen now? What is the next process? They're going to keep going down this road for the next 3 years. If they can get an indictment to possibly actually remove the president, it's possible if the Democrats get in the next election, they'll remove him. And then you'll have Vice President Pence. They want him out too. They're holding back. They already said, so what is their goal? I believe their goal is ultimately somehow to get Mrs. Clinton in. But they probably would just, if Trump, for some reason, they do the indictment on obstruction of justice, whatever it is, they're going down this road like what you would refer to as a banana republic. I saw some news people, forget which source it was now, and we'll end this. They actually said that the release of the memo was because of the Russian bots. Meaning some news reporters were saying that the American people and the hashtag release the memo were not people in this country. There were many conservatives and even liberals that wanted to see what was going on in the release of this memo. But some news outlets, and I heard it, they said it was the Russians that actually retweeted it. And the Russians are the ones that got the memo released. The media is in a delusional state. And if it was just about things that really didn't matter, it wouldn't mean a big thing. But they're in a delusional state about things that do matter. They're in a delusional state about true injustice that's taking place in the world and in our society. And they're in a delusional state because for a man that many people were not big fans of, till this day I'm not a big fan of Mr. Trump, but I pray for him and his family like I did for Obama. And they were in a delusional state because there were lines crossed under the Justice Department under Mr. Obama. Everybody knows it that knows anything. And they cover all that up. So I'll just do this as the update. The big problem with the whole thing was you never would use opposition research funded by Hillary Clinton and the Democrats as the central piece of the seeking of a FISA warrant. That's never been done. Never. And the media, the way they twisted it yesterday, they said, it's always been done. You see that line? They have never opened up an investigation on a president or one that's seeking to get elected from opposition research. That was never, ever the key piece of evidence that you would use to actually tap the phones of an opposing party or a president. It's never been done. And the media reported yesterday that it's always been done. Because that little semantic they used, Chuck Todd said, And how often does the Justice Department or the FBI use information from other intelligence agencies or other sources in order to investigate? And the expert, forget who it was, he said always. So something that's never been done before, but the media reports it's always done. Not so. Okay, that's the game. And we'll just do those few updates for right now. God bless everybody.